The Sol system was a ghost. At least, that was what the Galactic Council's official records stated. 3 centuries ago, humanity had burst onto the galactic stage with terrifying speed, impossible weapons, incomprehensible restraint, and a brief, brilliant flash of presence that left every major species recalibrating their threat assessments. Then, just as suddenly, they had vanished. No ships. No broadcasts. No expansion. No response to hails, inquiries, or the carefully worded diplomatic overtures that council ambassadors had spent years composing. The humans simply stopped. The council debated. Some species argued for investigation. Others, particularly those who had witnessed humanity's demonstrations firsthand, counseled patience. Or fear. Or both. In the end, the compromise was a single, automated monitoring station placed at the edge of the Sol system, tasked with a simple mission: observe and report. For 300 years, it observed. For 300 years, it reported nothing. The station's sensors ticked through decades of silence. Earth remained blue and green and alive, its cities glowing softly in the darkness. Mars showed signs of habitation. The orbital habitats maintained their steady orbits. But no ships departed. No signals escaped the system's gravity well. Humanity, it seemed, had simply stopped looking outward. The Council's xenologists offered theories. Technological regression, societal collapse, a deliberate choice to withdraw from galactic affairs. The most popular hypothesis, proposed by a respected Voral scholar, was that humanity had simply lost interest. Their brief emergence had been a historical anomaly, a temporary surge of curiosity that had peaked and faded. They were, the scholar concluded, a quiet species now, content to remain in their system, untroubled and untroubling. The classification was officially adopted. Sol system, quiet cultural preserve. No contact. No intervention. No concern. The centuries passed. The monitoring station continued its patient vigil. Its memory banks filled with decades of silence. Its power cells were replenished by automated supply drones that arrived every 50 years, performed maintenance, and departed. The station's AI, a simple consciousness tasked with a simple mission, waited. On an unremarkable cycle, the silence broke. The station's sensors registered an energy signature emanating from the inner system. Not a broadcast. Not a distress call. A drive signature. A ship. The station's AI processed the data. The signature was unlike any in its database. No conventional engine emissions. No heat plume. No radiation trail. It moved with impossible silence and improbable speed, emerging from the gravity well of Earth and accelerating toward the outer system. The AI waited. More signatures followed. 2, 5, 12. A steady stream of vessels, each identical, each silent, each moving with the same patient, purposeful velocity. They did not communicate. They did not broadcast. They simply departed. The station's programming was very simple. Observe and report. It had observed. Now it must report. A single, urgent ping transmitted across the vast distance to the nearest council relay station. The message was brief, encoded in standard galactic protocol, and utterly without elaboration. Unidentified objects detected. Multiple signatures. Origin inner Sol. Destination unknown. The relay station received the ping and forwarded it to Regional Command. Regional Command analyzed the data and forwarded it to Council Headquarters. Council Headquarters convened an emergency session. The delegates arrived in confusion and departed in silence. The signatures were real. The objects were real. They were moving through known space with a directness that suggested purpose, a purpose that no one could identify. They avoided inhabited systems, avoided trade routes, avoided any interaction whatsoever. They simply traveled. The Council's analysts worked through the night. They compared the signatures to every known vessel type, every historical record, every classified military file. Nothing matched. The objects were not just unidentified. They were unidentifiable. A junior researcher, reviewing the station's centuries of data, made a connection. She compared the new signatures to a single, fragmentary recording from 300 years ago, the only surviving sensor log of a human warship. The match was not perfect. The technology had clearly evolved, transformed, transcended its original form. But the foundational principles were identical. The drive signature, the hull composition, the complete absence of detectable emissions. She presented her findings to the emergency session. Her voice was steady, but her bioluminescence flickered with barely contained fear. The objects are human, she said. They are human ships, and they are leaving Sol in significant numbers. The chamber was silent. 3 centuries of assuming humanity had faded, regressed, lost interest. 3 centuries of classifying Sol as a quiet preserve, a museum of a species that had briefly burned bright and then extinguished itself. The monitoring station's ping continued to echo through the Council's data networks, a simple, devastating message. Unidentified objects detected. Multiple signatures. Origin inner Sol. Destination unknown. No one asked what the humans were doing. No one asked where they were going. The only question, whispered in private quarters and encrypted military channels, was the one no one dared speak aloud. What have they been doing for 300 years? The Sol system was no longer a ghost. It was a door swinging open, and something was emerging from the silence. The galaxy had forgotten Earth. But Earth, it seemed, had not forgotten them. The Council's central data hub was a cathedral of information. Its servers contained the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 species, 10,000 years of history, every scientific discovery, every military engagement, every diplomatic treaty ever recorded by galactic civilization. It was quite simply the most comprehensive database in known space. It was also, the analysts were discovering, completely useless. Senior Analyst Vex had been transferred from Vigil Station to Council Headquarters following the Sol System alert. Her expertise in deep space signal analysis, honed by 43 years of listening to silence, made her the obvious choice to lead the investigation. She stood now before the primary holographic display, her bioluminescence pulsing with frustrated confusion. The objects moved across the display in perfect formation. 12 vessels, emerging from the inner Sol system and accelerating along a precise trajectory toward the galactic core. Their speed was improbable, far beyond what their apparent mass should allow. Their silence was absolute. No engine emissions, no heat signatures, no radiation trails, no communication bursts. They were, as far as the Council's most sensitive instruments could determine, invisible to any form of passive detection. The only reason they had been noticed at all was the monitoring station's active sensor ping. "They're not trying to hide," Vex said, her voice quiet. "If they were, we wouldn't see them." The station's ping was low frequency, easily jammed. They didn't even attempt to mask their presence. "Then why aren't they responding to hails?" asked Velk, her former junior researcher, now assigned as her assistant. His facets rotated rapidly, capturing every angle of the impossible data. "If they want to be seen, why won't they communicate?" Vex had no answer. She turned to the database search results, scrolling through the endless negative matches. No known species built ships with these drive signatures. No known propulsion system could achieve these velocities without detectable emissions. No known hull composition could absorb every frequency of electromagnetic radiation while maintaining structural integrity at FTL speeds. "Run the comparison again," she ordered. "Expand the parameters. Include theoretical designs, abandoned prototypes, classified black projects. Everything." Velk's manipulators danced across the interface. The search expanded, reaching into the deepest, most restricted layers of the Council's archives. Files that had not been accessed in centuries flickered across the display. Ancient warships, experimental drives, rumors and legends and half-remembered myths. Nothing matched. "There is no record," Velk said slowly, "of any vessel from any species at any point in galactic history that matches these signatures." He paused, his facets dimming. "Except one." He pulled up a single file. It was fragmentary, corrupted by age and repeated transfers between obsolete storage formats. The header was barely legible. Incident Report, New Providence, 8472 Alpha. The date stamp was 300 years old. Vex opened the file. The data was sparse. Sensor logs from a long decommissioned Council monitoring station, eyewitness accounts from terrified colonists, a single, grainy image of a ship that was already fading from memory. The drive signature was faint, almost lost in the noise of 3 centuries of data degradation. But it was there. The same impossible silence. The same improbable speed. The same complete absence of detectable emissions. "Human," Vex whispered. "They're human." The chamber was silent. 12 vessels, moving with patient purpose through the void. 3 centuries of silence from the Sol system. And now this. Velk's voice was barely audible. "What do we do?" Vex stared at the display. The human ships continued their steady progress, ignoring the Council's hails, ignoring the frantic analysis, ignoring the panic spreading through every intelligence agency in known space. They were not hiding. They were not communicating. They were simply moving. "We wait," Vex said. "We observe. We try to understand." She paused. "And we update the files." She pulled up the Council's official record on humanity. It was thin, outdated, largely speculative. 3 centuries of no contact had resulted in 3 centuries of no new information. The file contained basic biological data, a brief summary of humanity's emergence and withdrawal, and a single, heavily redacted appendix titled Technical Assessment, Terran Weapons Capabilities. Vex began to type. Subject: Human Propulsion Technology. Classification: Unknown. Capabilities: Exceed all known parameters. Detection profile: Negative across all EM frequencies. Speed: Estimated 0.7 C sublight, indefinite duration. FTL signature: Not detected. Theoretical models: Inconclusive. She paused. The cursor blinked, waiting for more. She had nothing more to give. Conclusion: Human ships cannot be reliably detected, tracked, or intercepted using current galactic technology. Their capabilities have advanced significantly since last contact. Extent of advancement: Unknown. Intentions: Unknown. She saved the file and sat back, her bioluminescence dim. The 12 human vessels continued their patient journey across the display, silent and unreadable. They had not responded to a single hail. They had not deviated from their course. They had not acknowledged the Council's existence. They were not hiding. They were not threatening. They were simply there. And that, Vex realized, was the most terrifying thing of all. The humans had spent 3 centuries in absolute silence, building something the galaxy could not detect, could not track, could not understand. They had emerged not with weapons raised or demands broadcast, but with quiet, purposeful movement toward an unknown destination. The galaxy had forgotten Earth. Earth had not forgotten them. And now, everyone was trying to remember what they had been so eager to forget. The Council chamber had never been so quiet. Not during the Thrax crisis. Not during the Xylos incursion. Not even during humanity's first appearance, when a single small ship had rearranged a moon and rewritten the mathematics of war. That silence had been the silence of shock. This was the silence of fear. Ambassador Thrax of the Thrax Dominion, a descendant of the admiral who had faced Captain Vance 3 centuries ago, sat rigid in his obsidian throne. His mandibles were clamped shut, his posture carefully controlled. He had grown up hearing the story of Viridian's Eye, the moon that still drifted in 6 perfect fragments around the Council station. His grandfather had never spoken of it without a tremor in his voice. Now his grandfather's fear was his own. "The monitoring station's data is confirmed," said the Voral presiding officer, her bioluminescence flickering in erratic pulses of anxiety. 12 vessels. Human origin. Course plotted toward the galactic core. No response to hails. No deviation from trajectory. She paused. No indication of hostile intent. "Yet," growled a Crawl delegate, his carapace clicking with barely contained aggression. "No indication yet. They did not announce their attack 3 centuries ago either. They simply demonstrated. They demonstrated on an uninhabited moon," Ambassador Thrax said quietly. "Not on our fleet. Not on our worlds. They chose restraint." "Restraint is not mercy," the Crawl replied. "Restraint is patience. And patience has an expiration date." The chamber dissolved into argument. Some delegates demanded immediate military mobilization. Others counseled continued observation. A third faction, small but vocal, proposed sending a diplomatic mission to Sol, an idea that was met with immediate, universal horror. "You wish to approach their homeworld?" a Quarren engineer exclaimed, his facets flashing with alarm. "Without invitation? Without understanding their capabilities? You saw the sensor data. We cannot detect their ships. We cannot track their movements. We cannot even confirm how many of them exist. Approaching Sol would be like walking into a dark room and hoping there is no floor." The debate raged for hours. No resolutions were passed. No decisions were made. The Council, designed to facilitate order and consensus, found itself paralyzed by the one thing its procedural frameworks could not accommodate: absolute uncertainty. In a private chamber away from the main hall, Senior Analyst Vex reviewed the data for the 100th time. The 12 vessels continued their patient journey across her display, silent and unreadable. She had run every analysis, every comparison, every theoretical model in the Council's archives. She had found nothing. 3 centuries of silence. 3 centuries of no contact, no communication, no expansion. The Council had assumed humanity had faded, regressed, lost interest. They had classified Sol as a quiet cultural preserve and moved on to more pressing concerns. But Vex had spent 43 years listening to silence at Vigil Station. She knew that silence was not the same as emptiness. Silence was simply the absence of signal. It said nothing about what might be waiting, patient and still, beyond the range of your sensors. "What are you doing?" she whispered to the display. "Where are you going? What do you want?" The vessels did not answer. They never answered. They simply continued their steady progress toward the galactic core, indifferent to the panic they had unleashed. Velk entered the chamber, his facets dim. "The Council has adjourned. No consensus. They've formed a special committee to investigate." He paused. "You've been appointed chair." Vex did not look away from the display. "Of course I have. I'm the expert on human signals." Her voice was flat. "I spent 43 years listening to nothing. Now I have something to listen to, and I have no idea what it means." Velk hesitated. "There's something else." The Thrax ambassador requested a private meeting. He says his grandfather left him something. Records from the original incident. Personal notes. He paused again. He thinks they might help. Vex finally turned from the display. "Help with what?" "Understanding," Velk said. He said his grandfather spent the rest of his life trying to understand humanity. Why they showed restraint. Why they withdrew. What they were waiting for. He paused. He never found answers. But he never stopped looking. Vex considered this. The ambassador's grandfather had faced Captain Vance across a council chamber, had witnessed the demonstration, had surrendered his fleet and his pride and his certainty. He had spent 3 decades in retirement, studying human history, human culture, human psychology. His notes were said to fill an entire data vault. "Contact the ambassador," Vex said. "Tell him I accept his request." She turned back to the display, to the 12 silent vessels moving through the void. 3 centuries of silence. 3 centuries of waiting. They didn't withdraw because they lost interest. They withdrew because they were preparing for something. She paused. "I need to understand what." The vessels continued their patient journey. They did not accelerate. They did not deviate. They simply moved, silent and purposeful, toward a destination only they knew. The galaxy had forgotten Earth. Earth had not forgotten them. And now, everyone was trying to remember what they had been so eager to forget. But the humans were not waiting for the galaxy to remember. They were moving, and no one knew why. The first human ship arrived at Council Station Prime without warning. One moment, empty space. The next, a vessel of impossible silence hung in synchronous orbit, its hull drinking starlight, its presence announced only by the gravitational disturbance of its mass. Panic erupted. Defense systems powered up. Ambassadors were rushed to secure chambers. Military vessels scrambled from nearby outposts. The human ship did nothing. It orbited for exactly 1 standard cycle, silent and patient. Then, as silently as it had arrived, it departed. The pattern repeated. A human ship at the Thrax shipyard. At the Voral homeworld. At the Quarn Engineering Academy. At the Kral Military Archives. Each arrival identical. Silent approach, stationary orbit, 1 cycle, silent departure. No communication. No demands. No explanation. The Council convened in continuous emergency session. Analysts worked around the clock, searching for pattern, purpose, threat. The human ships visited worlds that had encountered humanity 3 centuries ago. They visited sites of historical significance to the species that had witnessed the demonstration at Viridian's Eye. They did not visit Earth. They did not visit human colonies. They seemed uninterested in their own territory. "They're mapping us," the Kral delegate insisted. "Reconnaissance for invasion." "Then why don't they hide?" the Voral presiding officer countered. "They announce their presence and wait. This is not reconnaissance. This is communication." "Communication requires a message," the Quarn engineer said. "They have sent no messages. What are we supposed to understand?" No one had answers. The human ships continued their patient circuit, leaving confusion and fear in their wake. On a remote, windswept world, an ancient Kral watched the sensor feeds from his retirement sanctuary. Admiral Vorn was 347 years old, his carapace faded and cracked, his mandibles worn smooth by decades of disuse. He had not left this world in a century, but he watched the feeds. He watched the human ships arrive and depart, silent and patient, and he remembered another human who had stood before him with gray eyes and calm voice and the power to shatter moons. His granddaughter, now Ambassador Thrax, visited him on the eve of the Council's emergency session. "Grandfather, the Council needs your counsel. You faced them before. You understand them." Admiral Vorn was silent for a long time. "I do not understand them," he said finally. "I have spent 3 centuries trying. I studied their history, their culture, their languages. I thought, perhaps, if I could comprehend what they were, I could forgive myself for failing to defeat them." He paused, his gaze fixed on the display. "I never succeeded. They are not like us. They are not like any species I have encountered. They fight with terrible efficiency and restraint with impossible discipline. They build weapons that defy physics and ships that violate detection. And then, when they have demonstrated their power, they withdraw into silence and wait." He turned to face her. "But I understand this much. They are not here to fight. They are not here to threaten or conquer. They are here to remember." "Remember what?" "Us," Vorn said. "They are visiting the worlds they encountered 3 centuries ago. They are observing the species they met, the civilizations they judged, the beings who laughed at their small ship and then watched their moon fracture into pieces. They are not surveying our defenses. They are revisiting, reacquainting, remembering." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And they want us to know that they remember too. Every word spoken in that chamber. Every laugh. Every dismissive gesture. Every assumption we made about their weakness and insignificance. They have not forgotten. They have been waiting, patient and silent, for 300 years. And now they are showing us that their patience has not diminished." Ambassador Thrax stood motionless. "What do they want from us?" Admiral Vorn shook his head slowly. "I do not think they want anything. They are not demanding or threatening or negotiating. They are simply reminding us that they exist, that they are still there, in their quiet system, watching and waiting and remembering." He paused. "Perhaps they want us to remember as well. Not the fear, not the humiliation, the truth." "What truth?" "That they showed us mercy," Vorn said quietly. 3 centuries ago, they could have destroyed us. They had the power and, by every law of war, the justification. Our fleet was massed before them. Our weapons were charged. Our intent was hostile. They could have annihilated us and called it self-defense. He paused. They did not. They fired once, at an empty moon, and waited for us to understand. He looked at his granddaughter, his ancient eyes holding a certainty that had taken 3 centuries to crystallize. "That is what they want us to remember. Not their power, their restraint. Not their weapons, their patience. Not their capacity for destruction, their choice to withhold it." He turned back to the display. "They are not here to frighten us. They are here to remind us that we are still alive because they decided 300 years ago that we should be." The human ship completed its orbit and departed, following its predecessors toward the galactic core. Admiral Vorn watched it go, his ancient carapace still and silent. "They're not here to fight," he whispered. "They're here to remember. And they want us to know that they remember too." Ambassador Thrax had no response. She stood beside her grandfather, watching the empty space where the human ship had been, and tried to comprehend the weight of 3 centuries of patient, silent memory. The galaxy had forgotten Earth. Earth had not forgotten them. And now, everyone was being invited to remember what they had been so eager to forget, that humanity had once looked upon a hostile fleet and chosen, for reasons no one understood, to let it live. The invitation was silent. The response was not yet written. But the human ships continued their patient circuit, and the galaxy watched and waited, and tried to remember how to be worthy of mercy. The last human ship departed Council Station Prime on a standard rotation, its silent drive carrying it away from the panicked bureaucracy and toward the distant, quiet system from which it had come. It did not look back. It did not need to. Its message had been delivered, its circuit completed, its presence recorded in the terrified memory of 100 species. The ship vanished from sensors at the edge of known space, its signature fading into the background radiation of the galaxy. The Sol system fell silent once more. But the silence was different now. For 3 centuries, the quiet of Sol had been the silence of irrelevance. A dead system, a forgotten species, a historical footnote that no one bothered to read. The Council's official records had classified Earth as inactive and moved on to more pressing concerns. Now, the silence was the silence of a held breath. The first priority was the files. Every species, every government, Every military organization with access to the Council's databases immediately initiated comprehensive reviews of their information on humanity. What had been thin, outdated, and largely speculative was now subjected to intense scrutiny. The Voralzenology Division assembled a dedicated team of 200 researchers to compile every scrap of data on human biology, psychology, and culture. They analyzed centuries-old signals from Earth's radio broadcasts, reconstructing human history from fragmented transmissions of news, music, and entertainment. They produced a 12-volume report titled Terran Civilization, a comprehensive analysis, and immediately classified it at the highest level. The Quarn Engineering Guild reopened their files on the Viridian's Eye incident, subjecting the fragmentary sensor data to new analytical techniques developed over 3 centuries. They modeled and remolded the gravitational shear effect, attempting to reverse engineer the physics of humanity's impossible weapon. Their simulations continued to crash. Their theorists continued to propose increasingly desperate hypotheses. Their engineers continued to sketch designs for defensive systems that no one knew how to build. The Krull Military Command convened a special council of their most experienced tacticians, including the ancient Admiral Vorn, who was transported from his retirement world to the Krull homeworld for the first time in a century. He sat at the head of the council, his faded carapace a silent monument to the last war humanity had chosen not to fight, and listened as younger officers debated strategies for engaging an enemy they could not detect, could not track, could not understand. "We cannot fight what we cannot find," one tactician concluded, "and we cannot defend against what we cannot predict." He paused, his mandibles clicking with reluctant admiration. "They have achieved strategic supremacy without firing a single shot. We are not their adversaries. We are their students." The council sat in silence. Admiral Vorn said nothing. He had spent 3 centuries learning from humanity. He had nothing left to teach. On Earth, life continued as it always had. Humans built cities, raised children, argued about politics and sports and entertainment. They did not know about the panic they had caused, the files being updated, the strategies being debated. They did not know that their silent ships had circled the galaxy and returned, that 100 species were now desperately trying to understand them. They simply continued, building, growing, learning. And occasionally, in laboratories and shipyards and classified research facilities, designing things that were not small. The Council's emergency session adjourned without resolution. There was nothing to resolve. Humanity had not made demands, issued threats, or declared war. They had simply appeared, observed, and departed. The Council could not negotiate with silence. It could not appease patience. It could only wait, like everyone else, for the quiet species to make its next move. Senior Analyst Vex remained at her post, monitoring the Sol system with obsessive dedication. The monitoring station continued its patient vigil, its sensors ticking through the silence. No new signatures emerged from the inner system. No ships departed. No broadcasts escaped Earth's gravity well. The humans, it seemed, had returned to their centuries-long quiet. But Vex no longer believed that quiet meant inactive. She had spent 43 years listening to silence at Vigil Station, and she had learned that silence was not emptiness. Silence was simply the absence of signal. It said nothing about what might be waiting, patient and still, beyond the range of your sensors. She watched the sensor feeds, the empty space where the human ships had appeared and vanished, the quiet system at the edge of known space that was no longer forgotten. She thought about the 12 vessels that had circled the galaxy and returned, about their perfect orbits and patient departures, about the message they had delivered without words. "We are here. We have always been here. We have been watching." The galaxy had forgotten Earth. Earth had not forgotten them. And now, everyone knew that the quiet system at the edge of known space was not empty. It was waiting. Vex did not know what humanity was waiting for. Neither did the Council, the Thrax, the Krull, or any of the 100 species that now lay awake in their climate-controlled quarters, staring at the darkness and wondering what moved within it. But they all understood with perfect, terrible clarity that the waiting would not last forever. The humans had demonstrated their patience for 3 centuries. They had also demonstrated, with a single shot at an empty moon, what happened when their patience expired. The monitoring station's sensors continued their patient tick. The Sol system remained quiet. The galaxy waited. And somewhere, in a shipyard orbiting Earth, a team of human engineers was working on something that was not small at all.